what could they possibly be trying to find by subpoenaing the records, Barbara, of relatives, a therapist, and others?
It's difficult to know. It seems to me likely that these are phones that may be associated with the individual reporters. You know, maybe somebody has their spouse on their own account or even their mother on their own account. They're taking a very broad search. That's my best guess. But as Lisa said, that's exactly what they're not supposed to do. Under federal regulations and the law of the Second Circuit, which recognizes common law privileges, media reporters get a qualified privilege. That doesn't mean they're immune from grand jury subpoenas, but before prosecutors seek to obtain such records, they're supposed to narrow the search. And by looking for relatives' phones, they're clearly not narrowing the search. They're also supposed to ensure that they can't get this information from any other source and that it is critically important to the investigation. The fact that they claim to be looking at some reporting that occurred in early July and went back as far as January with these records does suggest that they are not being as narrow as the law and their regulations require.
Chris, do you see this as another example of the administration further trying to delve into what is or has been the legitimacy of the free press?
It certainly seems like that. Listen, throughout my career, any investigations into the press, into elected members of Congress or any other elected officials or members of the clergy all fell into a category called sensitive investigative matters. And they were the things that you needed, a compelling reason to go after these individuals. And it was very narrowly scoped to just that individual. Certainly would not have included gathering information on their relatives or second and third tier associates. This to me seems like an effort to subvert their First Amendment protected rights, the freedom of the press, which is sacred to this democracy. And it seems like it's an irritant to this administration, and the Justice Department is being employed to intimidate and coerce them.
Yeah, so by making it this broad and not narrowly defining it, narrowly searching it, as Barbara and you and Chris are laying out, by making it this broad, is the intention to intimidate the journalists?
I think it is an attempt not only to intimidate the journalists involved here, but anybody else who would dare to report on things that infringe on what this administration would consider national security concerns. That is what they say justifies this investigation. And Katie, I want to raise one other part of this that I think is really worth discussing, which is how it implicates or how it potentially implicates the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, who is also, of course, the president's nominee for, I'm sorry, a child is trying to reach me.
I get it.
Also the nominee for the Office of Director of National Intelligence, Jay Clayton. What they say is Jay Clayton, when he testified last week at his confirmation hearing, was asked about these subpoenas and insisted that they followed the letter and spirit of the law to a T. They say that because they got no advance notification of the fact that they were going to be subpoenaing these phone records, that of course the department's own policy was not abided by, and therefore Clayton's own testimony may not have been truthful and accurate. They are essentially accusing Jay Clayton of lying under oath during his testimony to be the Director of National Intelligence. That is not something to be taken lightly, and I think we're sort of glossing over that because the bigger headline here is just the fact that they're seeking the information, but don't let that get lost, that there is an accusation here of not truthful testimony by the current U.S. Attorney and ODNI nominee.
Barbara, do you agree that that's a pretty big deal?
I do, because either it's not truthful or he didn't know, and either of those scenarios is unacceptable. When there is something as sensitive as reporters' records being reviewed, the U.S. Attorney absolutely needs to be on the loop on that and to approve. In fact, usually there's higher level approvals required in Washington. And so if he just rubber stamped this, that suggests that he is not paying attention to what the rules are and its compliance. And that's just as bad, I think, as lying about it. So either way, I think that his lack of candor or lack of understanding of what happened here is problematic. I also want to add, Katie, one other thing. You asked the question about whether this is an effort to intimidate reporters. And I think, I don't know what their motive is, but it certainly could have that effect. But I think the other effect that it could have is to intimidate and chill sources who may not want to speak to reporters if they're worried that this Justice Department is out there searching those records and their phones and their text messages, because those sources could end up being revealed.
So let me ask you, Chris, about the tension here between reporting on national security and trying to protect national security. I can, on the one hand, understand why the administration would not want people to know that this plane, this Qatari jet, is deficient in some ways or not as secure as the last plane was. I also understand the American public needing to know that the president is putting himself in a more vulnerable position because of his aesthetic tastes.
Well, listen, the press is not immune from national security investigations. So if there was information that was leaked and a journalist is directly responsible for that and in league with somebody from on the inside, but we're talking that would have to be the most sensitive, most highly classified information that would do irreparable harm to the national security of the United States. Reporting that this Qatari gift doesn't have countermeasures, doesn't have refueling capability, it's objectively apparent to anybody who knows anything about military aircraft or government aircraft.
What do you mean by that?
Because you can see the components on those aircraft that would demonstrate that they have it. This does not have it. This is information that was common knowledge, and going after these journalists and going after their family members, and the point, trying to intimidate other people who might be trying to share information about what's going on inside this administration is going to have a chilling effect, and it's damaging to the democracy because we have a populace that will be less informed.
Stu, is it too cute to ask whether this investigation stems from the president being upset about not being able to use his Qatari jet anymore?
No, it's not too cute. I think it's dead on. And that's kind of, we need to step back from this. Why is this happening? It's happening because the president of the United States did something he never should have done, which was take this gift from the Qataris, which ultimately is going to end up as kind of his private aircraft. The whole situation is absurd. The whole situation is corrupt. And now we found out because of Donald Trump's corruption, it is endangering national security. It's not the reporters that are endangering national security. It's Donald Trump's vanity and greed. It's not enough that he makes $2.2 billion. He also wants to get a free jumbo jet out of it. This is just, from 2015, when the Trump campaign began, it was a large criminal enterprise. That was obvious to anyone who worked in politics. And now that's just expanded. It's a very successful criminal enterprise that has a certain immunity from the Supreme Court. So, of course, this kind of stuff's going to happen. You elect a corrupt guy president, he's going to do corrupt stuff.
Stu, I mean, if he were to be endangered in that plane, if something were to happen to him or the other people on board that plane, I mean, I hesitate to think of the next steps after that. What might happen if the president of the United States is hurt or loses his life in that jet, how we might respond and what it might unleash?
Yeah, it's, as Chris was saying, this wasn't news, really. And you know for a fact that Donald Trump was told about this before he got on the plane, that this plane did not have refueling, that it did not have these countermeasures. And yet he, no doubt, insisted they use it anyway because it's a cool ride for him. I mean, he thinks this is great. It's more comfortable. It's got these nice colors, nice chairs. And that's the sort of level which he takes his job seriously, which isn't very serious. And of course, it would be just horrendous if something happens to the president of the United States. They're just so selective in how they pick and choose these issues. They have the attempted assassination in Butler that they use as an example of why they need to have increased security. They have this thing at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. So they need to tear down the White House and build a new ballroom. But with this, because Trump wants it, they don't care. It's just a frivolous way to take your job as president of the United States, which is what he does.